It's okay, the connection?
Yes, everything is good.
Okay, sorry.
Bingo.
There's a
Okay.
vast tradition ranging from Pompeii to the immense patrimony of frescoes spread throughout the territory. Muralism therefore strongly influenced the identity of the nation, especially as we shall see during the 20th century at the same time as the Mexican paintings. I'm sorry I don't speak better English in public, so I have a support. So now we see together 7 historical steps. The first, from 1923 to 1947, we can talk about the first period of Mexican muralism. Meanwhile, in Italy, in particular from 1923 to 1940, fascist muralism was born and developed. In truth, although belonging to a completely different political element, both aim to bring up the value of the community, the history and dignity of a country. It is therefore a muralism that serves a political cause. In Mexico, the personalities of the authors emerge particularly, so that today we easily distinguish the works and styles of Orozco, Siqueiros, and Rivera. We therefore speak about an authorial muralism, the same one that is present in Italy, although sacrificed to the needs of the regime. In this context, stand out the works of Achille Funi and Mario Sironi, authors of the Manifesto of the Mural Painting in 1933, and they believed, like Orozco, that the muralism was the one and only form of social and democratic expression. Meanwhile, these are also the years in which the New Deal program starts in America, 1933, 1937, and in Italy is approved the 2% law for the decoration of architecture, 1942-1949. The law required administration, state, regions, and in general all public bodies to allocate a percentage of the amount of the works, maximum 2%, for works of art to be placed in public buildings, such as school, courts, prison, university, and museum. This rule is still in force, and over the years has produced some results of great importance of Italian public art. From 1940 to 1945, we have the second period of Mexican muralism with a new plastic integration. Once the revolution is over, the figurative representation is lost, and a more abstract representation is started, as demonstrated by the wonderful work of Rufino Tamayo and Carlos Merida. And in this pic, we see a mosaic by Carlos Merida. In Italy, the mural experiences in this period become rarer. The 60s and 70s are those of the contestation. In the May of 1968 in France, we have the presence of a lot of numerous political posters, and the first mural that starts the muralist movement in Sardinia is officially dated in 1969. One of the bright examples of a strong, not figurative, but political component of the period is the mural of Friedrich Horner, which was made in Ireland and which is currently considered a national monument. In the 70s, flanked by a Pinochet coup, a lot of muralists coming from Chile began to come in Europe, and especially in Italy. Here, the component of the political manifesto is really important and blends together with the presence of writing with the figurative elements, not particularly realistic, but very symbolic elements. This is a very significant moment because an important step occurs. From authorial murals, we move on to those made by collectives. In fact, often they are not signed, or there are signatures that identify a group or a community. It's not a coincidence that very large writings represent the demonstration of the students up to the phenomenon of the Metropolitanians in 1977. And at this moment, in Italy, also the social centers and the murals of the workers have a great importance. We know that throughout this time, the culture of graffiti has spread widely in America, and therefore the Italian context is also influenced by underground culture of the period. So in 1979, we have the first exhibition of Giorgio Liquinoins in Italy. The 80s were very important because in this period, murals with strong political and social trends coexist with the first experiments of Fluxus that brings art to the street according to an aesthetic that fits contemporary visual canons. For example, Black Lerat said that he started working with stencil for some examples seen in Italy, like the stencil with the face of the Duce. Throughout the 19th, graffiti writing will dominate the scene until the early 2000s. In Europe, the size of graffiti was a subject of experimentation, and some writers had brought the letters to a very large extension, even on the facade of the first building, but it's too early in this phase to be able to use the expression new muralism, because the early 2000s will also be studied with the use of posters and above all stencil, very peculiar to street art. In the last 15 years, artists have begun to play more with the sides and by extending their supports. The expression street art has therefore also been applied to indicate the realization of these big walls or prospect or facade, as they have often been called. In truth, this intervention seems to be neo-muralism works because they include not only those works with a strong social political significance, but all the interventions that have lost their typical independence. What are, at this point, the most visible differences between graffiti, street art, and new muralism? Graffiti writing is a form of spontaneous pencil writing that is mostly unauthorized, made with sprays, defined for the most part by lettering, and made of different types of substrates, ranging from trains to long walls. Street art is a figurative event, often defined by genetically unauthorized poster art or stencil art. It is of small and medium in size, very often politically engaged, and built fairly quickly in urban centers. Muralism is instead made on large supports, and for this reason, it is an authorized intervention. It is usually defined by a strong social meaning, but there is no lack of tendentially decorative works, mostly made with brush and paint. A peculiar factor about what's called the be-colored new muralism, and which allows us to reconnect to the historical investigation listed in the previous point, is, of course, the importance of authorship. Globally, since Banksy became part of the world of street art, anonymous art par excellence has also sought to recover to lost copyright. This does not mean that in the past wasn't no or detectable artist, but for sure the great majority of the public did not pose any problem on identifying or not identifying the author of a work in a public space. And that was one of the biggest problems in the world of graffiti writing. Thus, Banksy managed to be authorial and anonymous at the same time, making, on one hand, a typical attitude of historical muralists, on the other, the typical anonymity of American writers. The return to an authorial muralism is both a positive and negative characteristic. Aside from purely aesthetic discourse, the risk is that this authorship corresponds to a need for fame by the artist, becoming oppressive, just like a commercial poster, attractive and appreciable, just like the paintings in the Legacy Museum in the world, becoming a brand. From what we have just explained, it happens that we have to find a need to connect together a work like that of Blue with a strong political and social meaning, and above all, unauthorized and authorized work, equally beautiful but more decorative. This is perhaps the reason why many times blues works are defined as a street art intervention instead of new muralism. But starting from what's shared, it would be more appropriate to link it to know the new muralism area. These reflections are intended to be an input to try to understand how to separate street art and new muralism in the same way that we are able to separate street art and graffiti writing. It's not my intention to dissect a phenomenon, but to try to understand which tools are best to create a common language that before passing on the public via social media must pass to those who study it. I started from Italy, but I think this question mark is global. We are not going towards a new muralism. We are already living it at the moment, and it would be very stimulating for me and for the study center in Italy to receive real impacts and impression. So, sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
It was a great condensed participation and a very clear, strong perspective on the state of the evolution and the considerations of the present moment of some of the big words that we are researching. So I think it was a very interesting presentation in this sense. Hopefully we'll trigger comments and contributions and thoughts. So someone, maybe someone Italian, Andrea. You, Isabel, you wanted to talk? No? You were like with your hand.
Yeah, can I?
Yes, please, go.
Yeah. So I understood that you said that street art, well, first of all, congratulations for the presentation, sorry. So I understood that you said that street art is non-political. I think she's lost. Can you hear me? Did you hear me?
Sylvia, you are not with the mic on. I think she's around somewhere. Yes, she's here. Okay, maybe she's with some sound problems. I don't know.
It's okay. I mean, we can just leave it for maybe.
Okay. I think, well, it was a very concise definition of several terms. I think we can try to pick up with Sylvia in the end of this panel.
Okay.
Hopefully Mathieu is ready to present his slideshow or his images. He's almost there. It's not totally there. It tells me. So, well, what I have to say that Inward, Sylvia was here representing an association of Italian association. I don't know if you know Inward, Andrea?
Yes, I do. Actually, one of the reasons why I didn't want to talk, I didn't want to speak is because otherwise it seems like, we're cooking our own cake. Yes, I do. And perhaps, since she's not here, maybe I ask myself that. I asked the question I wanted to ask her just to make perhaps clear, I hope, the kind of reason behind offering those definitions and trying to perhaps map that history. So Inward is actually this center for research on urban arts that now I think is hosted by the University of Naples, like the second University of Naples. And they just started a government-sponsored program to map the all of urban art in Italy. It is a somewhat of a controversial project because, as we all know, when you start mapping, then there are issues that are coming up. There has been a little bit of controversy around these themes in the community in Italy. People like, I don't know if you know Collettivo FX, and some of the researchers, including I think Fabiola Naldi, was somewhat airing some criticisms against the project. I have to say, like, the director of the center is called Luca, and I completely forgot his family name. And he contacted me because one of the aspects of the project will involve a series of committees or something like that, discussing different aspects. I think Enrico is going to be in the copyright part. I'm not sure where I'm gonna be.
Okay.
Where I'm gonna be exactly, because actually we postponed our Zoom meeting after the conference, because actually you called me when we were here. Pietro Rivasi is involved, as far as among those that I know. So perhaps one of the reasons you might want to see the definitions drawn in the ways in which they are and grouped together. So that's my guess. So I don't know. Maybe it's related to the project, and it makes a sense within the kind of landscape that the project creates. As probably many of you know, I would disagree with everything has been done with that distinction, but
yeah,
you have to contextualize it within that.
Yeah.
The kind of project, I guess. Again, that's my guess. So it's interesting because Luca, I think it's Luca Borriello, that's his name.
Yes, it is.
So they are trying to build connections and a way of relating.
From my perspective, they are kind of it's impressive the way they organized the attempt for joining local associations from different regions of Italy. And this is, of course, always polemical because each association in each region, it represents a bit the fringe of the graffiti writers or street artists that are willingly to organize collectively and visibly something. So they are just this visible fringe. So all the others, they contest this, of course.
I think there is Isabel that wants to say something.
Yes, Isabel, please.
No, I don't know if we have time now to have this conversation, but I would like to elaborate a little bit more on this. So I don't know if it's better to wait.
Go. Yes, we have. Mathieu asked me for 5 minutes, 2 minutes ago.
Great.
So we have more 3 minutes.
Okay, so I don't know anything about the InWords association that Silvia belongs to, and it's strange because she's not here now.
Yeah, it is very bizarre.
Okay. I don't know if they're a research center or I don't know.
Yeah. InWord is now a research center based at Second University of Naples.
Okay.
So the whole idea is that I will be affiliated to the center in some ways, but I beg you not to push me on these things because I have no idea about the details. Really, like Luca just sent me an email a few days ago about this possibility. And again, the point is that I am Italian, but I live in China, so I have a very, and I studied in the US, so I have a very strange connection with the Italian scene. I have connections with individuals.
Yes, but let me just say that InWord is running for some time now, at least like 12 years or something like this, 12, 14 years. And although it have this academic branch, it have a bigger dimension in terms of representing a group of associations. They try to federate the several associations that are around the several regions of Italy, that promote and do productions around graffiti and street art, and they try to federate them.
Mhm.
Because,
Yeah, no. Mm.
so go ahead.
No, I mean, like the
That's
only thing I wanted to say is that, you know what, just to reinforce a little bit what Pedro was saying, is that again, like, you know, if any of you have a sense of the kind of take I have on these themes, I mean, like Pietro Rivasi is involved, so it doesn't seem to be a so to say, like in a container that is imposed from above, but you know, the people that are working in the association and within the project are people genuinely engaged in the practices. So it's not an attempt from academia to hijack the study of the promotion or whatever of these practices. Of course, there are, as Pedro was saying, there are tensions and controversies always around the ways in which you build a connection or relationship with institutions, because of course there are structural problems and structural frictions. But they, I mean, as far as I know, and again, I have just heard about them, I've seen very little of what they did. They, you know, they seem to work in a very positive way. The kind of work they've been doing in Naples, which is one of the most active scenes in Italy, seems to be legit.
Yes, we have Mathieu is saying that he's exporting the file. So we have a question from Ayat. I don't know if you want to place it.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, your conversation is much more interesting. I was just wondering regarding.
Can you reach near to the microphone?
Oh yeah, sorry. I was saying that I think your conversation is much more interesting than what I want to ask. So just keep talking.
No, I have Mathieu already here, so I think you can talk, Mathieu.
Yeah, I'm almost ready. Like the file is still exporting. It's like a very long slideshow, but yeah, I didn't have proper time to manage to do the presentation, as I previously told you. So maybe I introduce myself and I start when the slideshow is ready. Yeah, okay.
Perfect. Yeah,
let's do it like this. So I'm Mathieu Tremblin. I'm a French artist living right now in Strasbourg. I've lived in many cities in France. And my background is, of course, graffiti. And I started to do, let's say, urban intervention or let's say more message-related, text-based related actions since 2005. 2005, yeah. So it's 15 years. I'm doing urban intervention in between the field of graffiti and citizen appropriation. And since 6 years now, I'm doing a PhD as a visual artist in the University of Strasbourg. The main thing about this PhD is I'm trying to develop what we call in Canada research creation. All the topic should be linked with my own practice, based on my own practice, and I try to make connection with other theoretical position and other artists practicing art. And of course, because the methodology is phenomenologic, is based on experience, most of my research have been has been to meet other artists and also to perform, interact with urban situation in order to then create some kind of storytelling narratives around the experience and try to analyze this. So today what I'm going to do is basically to give you a feedback about a conversation that happened on the cryptid mailing list that I put up in 2015 or 16. Where some of you actually that are listening are involved, and most of the time we chat about our finding. It's like this group that you have on Facebook about street art and graffiti that Martin Reed and Susan Hansen put up. You know, it's called Watchlist. And so we had a conversation with this group of artists, curator, whatever, about the topic of buffing and how many variation we could find and how different positions the artists, the city were taking. So as I'm in the process of writing my PhD now, I try to articulate everything, and it's too early to speak about it, but Pedro really wanted me to be involved. So I said yes, and I'm going to share the raw material and thoughts about all this topic of buffing, restoration, and maintenance. So I'm opening the file, and I'm sharing it. Yeah, wait for it. You allow me to share it. Yeah, perfect. OK. Partage l'écran.
Parfait.
So
Merci, merci.
Full screen. Yeah. Full screen, full screen, full screen. Yeah, OK. OK, good. So as I'm an artist, I'm going to start by an art action instead of giving a background. The main idea in my PhD is to speak on how graffiti writing in urban intervention in general, independent public art can be understood as a kind of meme culture. Meme, of course, you know the term from the internet, but it's actually a topic that have been developed before. A reflection around DNA and evolution. And so it's basically this idea of repeating and transforming, replication and transformation. So all my approach is based on it's interactional. I'm analyzing the interaction and the way things are replicating and transforming all the time. When you do an action as an artist, but also when you observe it as a passerby, or when you try to organize all this mess by programming a festival, and then there is some interaction with the authorities, with the city workers, with the passerbys and stuff like this. So, of course, you know this image, Potato Jesus, from 2013. It's the story of this woman. I'm sorry, I don't have the note next to me, so I don't want to say bullshit. So I'm gonna say this woman that made a private restoration for the good of the church, and it turned as a viral meme. But what is interesting here for me is that it's actually a real situation based on what's supposed to be an ancient painting, but it's actually something from the beginning of 20th century. So it's mocking the classical style of painting. It's not a classical painting. And then it turned on this kind of potato Jesus that started to be a meme on the internet, and people made and had a lot of fun about it. But I found it very interesting as it is revealing the way that common people want to get involved in the conversation around the arts, and they're not in this idea that professionals should do art. They are in this idea that they should contribute to the common good through the action, and it really inspired me for this gesture. So here is a painting from Benjamin Lading, which is a French Netherlands artist who painted in Strasbourg in 2011 during a festival named organized by Démocratie Créative. The principle of this black dot is doing this stop motion where he's actually reproducing the fat cap dot. When you push it, and so it becomes a full black dot. It takes 5 hours, something like this. The mural was not properly commissioned, but the festival find a way to deal with the city owner of the building owner, and after a few years, the festival collapsed. And so the painting is still here, but there is no real maintenance organization on how the thing should be managed for the future, because it was not supposed to be a muralism festival. It happened that some mural were painting and the people in charge went away. So it was left like this. And so after a few years, when I arrived in Strasbourg and started to live in this street, because actually I live really close to this mural, some people had painted over it. Like Neck is a local writer, and 3AKS is actually a writer from New York with his crew. It sounds a bit like a beginner in the style. It's very weird, but anyway, so the graffiti was covered several times. like this. And the city didn't care about it. Like they kind of understand the basic rule, and we have a commission piece, and we have some illegal painting over it, and how to deal with it, who's in charge. So I decided as a urban artist that I could be in charge of this restoration. And I came to the wall without permission and start to restore it in a very classical way. But I choose, instead of using the same black paint that Benjamin Leding was using, I choose to use a different color to acknowledge that I was doing this kind of intervention and shifting the original meaning, idea of identity of the visual, in order to address people that there was some interaction there, and there is the leftovers of the interaction that is also dialoguing with the originate shape of the visual, as you can see. But of course, what happened is some writer came again, Neck, the same writer, right over it. Maybe you already understood that the city worker will cover all the tags around, but won't touch the center of this black-red dot now. And now this is how it looks. The painters, time after time, they started to cover the circle of the dot, and now this is a totally in between shape. It's not the let's say the top of the shape is the piece of Benjamin Leding, and then you get a mix between my piece, city workers, and the taggers, and all is this creating this in between aesthetics. We don't understand why it looked like this. So now I come back to the classical topic of the question of a cover-up and maintenance. Of course, a lot of you heard or saw the Matt McCormick movie, The Subconscious Art of Graffiti Removal. The main discourse of the movie is that there is art and there is non-art, and it's as if there was this kind of unconscious global movement of art done by non-artists that existed in a public space. So it's basically an artification of a non-art gesture, but which come after a creative gesture of the writer. And so it's kind of the starter for basic understanding as buff that could be so as an aesthetic. If non-artists are doing an art form beneath their will, under the will, yeah, then it means that it's art again, so it can be appropriated by the artist and develop as an aesthetic in itself. Of course, this type of observation is not the one that McCormick made. Hector Dupuy, since the middle of the 90s, were already documenting this, and name it differently. It's not cover-up, because cover-up is only speaking about the technical aspect of recovering something, which is kind of linked with graffiti, but their title is caviardage and repeint. So let's say redacted and repainted, which are terms that are actually used when you want to describe a painting. So it's really this phase when you are doing a kind of restoration, and you are, or you even yourself as an artist, and come back on your painting and start to make modification over it. So it's really something that belongs to a longer understanding of the painting, for sure. But it's also a different point of view. It's not only graffiti based here. And of course, you got this photographer, English photographer, Stephen Gill, who also did this series named Cover and Removed. You got this French guy published a book named Cover Up, where it's actually his personal collection of image. You have also Igor Ponoshov, who made a big focus on Russian buffing forms. And that leads us to the book Buff Vanguard, which was published in 2018, and which actually gathers artists doing gesture in public space inspired by Cover Up, and also kind of found art by anonymous people doing cover-up, buffing surfaces, covering graffiti, but also using it as ornamental style. So here, of course, this is a more political approach, but all this avant-garde as subconscious art of graffiti removal is also to say, hey, random citizens, city workers are also participating in the conversation. They are also producing art form. This is the avant-garde of the buff. So here you got this ornamental perspective that suddenly appears and reproduces some existing forms, and you cannot acknowledge if it's an art piece or if it's some city worker decoration. And actually, it could be both. I mean, some artists could have faked it, or some neighbors to play with the ornamental aspect, and another coming after could be inspired by this spontaneous interpretation and redo it. And of course, when you start to look at this kind of redacting, this fact of adding some elements, it's also start to be this kind of cryptic visual language that I will come back a bit later. And so, of course, the buff, the cover-up can be seen as a form in itself, but then it can be used again by artists. Here you got Volodymyr, who actually is using back the cover-up to restore the existing graffiti before that, based on what was written before. So he's really using it to reshape the graffiti, and there is this kind of meme transformation, replication on transformation in between. Also, you have Sasha Comas that made a lot of, let's say, conceptual statement about it, playing also with this conceptual artwork, illegal inscription, spray on wall, fat cap, all this background that also acknowledge the artification of cover-up. Wait, yeah, okay. And then you really have this involvement of a lot of artists like Ekta, Brandgold, Misha Most, that are actually using the shape of the cover-up in itself and make it not autonomous as abstract painting, as monochrome or as a graphic pattern. And you come to the other aspects. So this is looking at it from an art point of view or artification, but then you also have this opposite perspective that was brought to attention by a few people, and especially Max Good, who did this movie Vigilante, the Battle of Expression, where he actually goes to see all these citizens that act like vigilante in order to remove all the paintings, all the graffitis that are in the streets, and by doing it, kind of become writers in the way and defend their own position and the way they should have the control of a life, control the walls of their surrounding from this involvement of all these punks. And it kind of became, I guess, a kind of fictional character. And really, Amos Style Wars 2 fiction, where this guy, Mr. White, is explaining that for him, graffiti has became a standard of what we expect to see in the city. So what about seeing a worldwide train? You know, it will be something different. It will be refreshing, whereas the graffiti is invading of our aspects. So actually, from these ones who are not, let's say, aware of the artistic aspect and just see it as a matter of control of the visual surrounding, here you already have this artification again, where the buff start to be an empowering movement, creative movement against the dictatorship of graffiti. Yeah, because you don't control it. And this idea of cleaning as an aesthetic also pop-ups. And you can have this writer Moose, who claimed to invent what he called the reverse graffiti in 1999, where he's actually putting stencils and using high pressure cleaner. What's the name? Yeah, anyway, you see what I mean? The high pressure cleaner. And this became a tool, of course, for a lot of artists like Juice, Agia Schwartz, who call it, not knowing maybe Moose, proper graffiti. And did several times as a performance, dressed like a city worker, with these logo types they got in the back. And you also have Alexandre Orion, you know this video, of course, in Sao Paulo who did a very long tunnel and did this graphic visual skulls, just cleaning the dirt, and also got arrested. And there is a whole video about it, and it's all about the pollution and subtracting information to bring acknowledgement of an already there situation. And this Paul Moose now is doing this kind of piece. He started to defend his reverse graffiti, so it's very funny to see that the white part are actually cleaned by the water, but then you have some people intervening and doing some writings, and then the city workers start to cover up graffiti over a clean background. You know, it starts to be some kind of loop. And of course, it's done with Greenworks, so it's a company like kind of a company like Greenpeace and stuff like this. So it's also became this argument of a proper graffiti that will actually bring more happiness because it's not degrading, it's subtracting material from the streets and making the world, the background cleaner. Okay, 10 minutes more. So artists tend to articulate this aspect of art, non-art, anonymous intervention, conscious intervention, aesthetic of cleaning, aesthetic of buffing, aesthetic of covering. And for example, Brad Doney did this buffer piece where he actually make faster the whole cycle of painting and cleaning, where he's actually writing, there is a guy coming behind him and erasing directly his graffiti. And of course, you get Sayo and Rizot who totally made autonomous the fact of covering up surfaces where they actually act over some kind of a public art, anonymous mural or some pizza decoration, or they can even act in public space as if it was normal to do this kind of abstract shape, because I realize that when you dress like a city worker, nobody is bothering you. And eventually, if you're not even doing a sign, but an abstraction like a square, nobody will care. And this started to be also a very inspiring action for Sayo himself, who started to, like Brad Doney, a conversation with himself about the fact of erasing, and who started to paint over the people who were painting over the truck he was painting. So each time somebody was drawing a shape, like a tag, he was covering it up in order to bring this kind of abstract density material in order it became some kind of abstract canvas. And you can understand it here. It was covered by SK Guy. And so he came and he did this buffing style, and he did it again and again and again. So it's really this idea of buffing, covering up as a not as an aesthetic, but as a conversation, and itself thinking about it as a way of restoring the dialogue with the passerby. So of course, you got the obvious example of the conversation in Axe by Mobster, who's doing this, is this shade of gray acceptable, and that the guy paint over him and is doing it again, until he get bored. And you have this situation that Pedro invited me, where it's actually start to link with all different social topics. Like for example, is Bairro Padre Cruz. Sam had this painting that he did years ago, and in 2008. And as a mural festival came to the neighborhood, the municipality or the city worker decided to clean up the graffitis that already existed. And so Sam had to paint back the painting dedicated to the neighborhood that he did previously for the opening of the festival. So he had to restore his own painting because it was erased by mistake by the municipality. But what about the taggers, the local taggers? You know, for sure he did it for the community, but actually the writers are part of the community. Why should we have only the proper writers, street artists invited for the neo-muralism? And why can't we have both the local graffiti and the writing? So when I arrived and I saw this situation, I decided to make a restoration of the local graffiti in the same way, like to make a parallel between various manners of dealing with restoration and addressing a social and existing community. Okay, I will go faster. So just this one, it's a cat crew You might have heard about it. This toy you got over the tram graffiti is actually made by the anti-graffiti team that is putting lines and crosses, and sometimes their crew name, CAT, crew anti-tag, in order to highlight the documented graffiti they have. And they also understood it. Each time they take a picture, they make a line over the graffiti that the writer ate it. So they are actually bringing a new layer of interaction through the documentation. And while they do their work, they start to be part of the game somehow. And here you get this caviardage style. So it's called blacking out or redacting. It's this situation where anonymous citizen goes over some existing slogan and add lines in order the graffiti is not readable again. And you, of course, can see it through the swastika also. And as a kind of study in part of my research, I made this kind of type experiment where I tried to gather a lot of document about it and to provide a type that will address, as I previously show you, the restored black dot at the beginning, the fact that there is some kind of dialogue, tension, interaction, conversation happening, and you can see it through the sign that there is a conflict here with two forces fighting each other. So I was really thinking on how you can speak about the unspeakable, about this fight between buffing and writing. So this is what it looked like. And if you travel a bit, then you can see that there is the same situation happening, but this time with a social based and local territorial based interaction, which is the Red Star versus the Partizan, with our football fans in Belgrade, in Serbia, which actually started for sure by doing some graffitis, a crew of football fans. And they did it by cover up, but it started to be odd, like they were putting lines and the other will come and restore it instead of paint over, it will restore and remove the lines that were painting. And then of course the other will add lines in order we don't read the slogans. And it starts to be this kind of messy situation where it's kind of a cryptic language. And at the end, they will end up like restoring the tags by covering the lines. You know, it's like this kind of loop where it starts to be a meta discourse on the discourse itself. Like there was an argument, the people didn't agree, so they destroy it by adding lines, and the guy is coming back and removing the lines. It's like this kind of ongoing conversation where the conflict is still embodied in the writing. And so it reminded me of Jeroen Jungeling Elemental series, where it is actually just doing the scribbles that are the visual signs that incarnate this kind of tension between somebody saying something and somebody that doesn't want that its message is spread. So it's just this abstraction of a conflict, of contradiction that is existing around language in public space. And so I'm gonna go on this various situation of conversation. Here you got Aubetre, who did this piece called Direct Democracy in 2013. He got this authorization to exploit this visual of Socialist Party as a permission from the city. And so he asked people to vote if he will do it or not, without precising what he will do. And of course, people say yes. So he says, thanks for your confidence. And the thing is that the city had allowed it, but the city workers didn't understand that it was an art piece because it looked like classical graffiti, so they cleaned it. So what he did, he came back and wrote, hey, anti-tag service, could you call me back at this number? Thanks. And of course, the guy came up and erased it again. So at the end, the guy is obligated to reveal the trick. He say, hey, don't erase me. I'm invited by the museum of the city. Please contact them for more info. So it's actually how in the conversation, various layers of powers are appearing in this kind of interaction. And of course, you can think about it through this self-erasing of blue painting. Actually, it's not him, it's a guy who produced it, who erased it, but who was actually this this will of Blue not to get instrumentalized by real estate in order to gentrify the city. And so he decided to cover his own mural. And it's also a way to play with this kind of buffing. Instead of an aesthetic, buffing your own work can actually be a part of the conversation. And I'm going to conclude with two examples, very quick, on this sliding from the buff and this political understanding, the dealing with the censorship. Here you got some advertising, which is actually an artist who was hired by this beer brand to paint murals in a public space and pretending it's art. So there is just this Tot Léger slogan that is apparent, not the name of the brand, which is excellent. And you got this shape of the bottle, which is here on the background. And so the guy access to spaces for making paintings, but actually he shouldn't be because it's advertising. He shouldn't have those spaces. And then smarter advertiser take the pictures and put it in billboards in the city. So what happened? The writers, of course, were not happy with it. And they created this collective named Srat, which is a game of words with Nasrat, which means shit. And they decided to fill the bottle of the beer with ink and paint and throw paint bombs and fire extinguisher all over the place. So it's not about the buffing, but in the same time, it's this kind of vigilante on the way of how graffiti could be exploited to gentrify the city, to bring advertising in the wrong places. And of course, at the end, they destroyed a billboard of advertising. And I will just conclude with this and not make so much comments, but it's very interesting. I asked Bien Urbain to give me some access to their image of this painting of Essif from 2011 called La Propriété, which is related to Proudhon, this guy who say ownership is theft, you know, this anarchist slogan. And so he wrote it without the slogan. And of course, this dog is a metaphor of the owner who is keep taking something from him, from the nature, the surrounding. And the anarchists saw it because they read books about gentrification and didn't acknowledge the precise situations that bring Essif to do this painting. They accuse the festival of gentrifying, but they're not gentrifying anything. They're just, I mean, there is no municipality will or urban planning anything around, and the rent doesn't go up or anything. It's just a painting on the wall. So they start to write a lot of slogans, La Propriété c'est le vol, Proudhon, anarchy, and then the density of writing started to spread across, and the workers decided by themselves that they will restore the painting because they like the dog. And so they started to erase the side of it. And time by time, they start to put paint and they start to maintain the painting. And as you can see, you have the ghost of the previous writing, and it's not Essif or Bien Urbain. They didn't even ask him. They start to restore the painting by themselves, and you see the various layers of intervention and the way they start to embody the artwork and make them their own. You know, like the bottom of it is a part of the workers. And then you even see those bottles that are thrown over the walls, and then they paint in kind of pink, and they restore it. And I guess that will be it. So it's ongoing. It's not even a reflection. It's for now. It's a corpus, and I'm gonna analyze. I'm starting to analyzing in between this aesthetic point of view and this conversation point of view that I think is more interesting than the aesthetical one, which is basically the one from subconscious art of graffiti removal. But I think we have to address on the conversation happening in the streets, not only about the art.
That's so good, Mathieu. You see, it's perfect. I think everyone is very happy to see this content, and it's very thought-provoking, and it's very relevant. Well, I don't know if anyone have already some questions or remarks to do to Mathieu, or comments to the work. Isabel, do it.
Sorry again.
No problem.
I just, because the potato Jesus is in Spain.
Yeah.
Have you been there?
No, I've not been there, but I read a lot about it and all the
Yeah.
situation, how there was a trial about the ownership and stuff like this, which is interesting part I couldn't address there.
Yeah,
Because
I
that's
think
fascinating.
it was very smart and very fun to introduce the great presentation with that example. Today, that Christ is a place of pilgrimage. It's a kind of like tacky, freak pilgrimage route, and we all love to go there to see that
Sure.
overt case of vandalism. Yeah, so I just want to say that in case you're interested.
Yeah, and
We happen.
I knew it. That's why I wanted to speak about it, because it's actually interesting that the non-art form become more interesting than the form, and it's all about the meme and the conversations. And yeah, for sure, the movie is lame, but have you seen the meme based on the movie? You know, it's really the same.
So anyone else wants to make some question to Mathieu? I was curious to understand, Isabel, if these persons that go to visit that painting, what kind of persons are we talking? Are you talking about the religious persons that go to church, or are you talking about the street art and graffiti community that would like to see this strange thing, or generic public? What kind of public?
I could say not necessarily related to street art or graffiti at all, but I could say it's young person, I mean, like in their 40s, 30s, with a great sense of humor, who just found the restoration fun. And it's a kind of like tacky thing, kitsch, so to say. So if you like kitsch stuff, you go and take an excursion there. You know, I have friends who decided to do their honeymoon there. So it's,
Okay.
I would say kitsch would be the best way to. So that would be the average. So you don't go there with any respect, obviously, to the religion or the opposite, I could say.
Svenska said it correctly. It's ironic pilgrims.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ironic program. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's a landmark. It's something you have to do in your life once.
Yeah. I don't know if, yeah, you had something to add, Ayat? Aynat? Yep.
Personally told me that there are places around the world which actually places around friends have told me that there are places around the world where you have the buffing crews have like tags, so people will know that they were the ones that erased. And because they have fights between the crews, the whole city is full with the tags of the buffing crews. So like you can have a city and you have all these tags which are not the graffiti making them, but the buffing crews. And I was also wondering if have you seen this, document this thing, because I've heard it from many friends, but I haven't seen it myself.
I never heard about it, but yeah, of course, I knew this type of story, like very basically the writers who are tagging over the truck and say, hey man, your truck is tagged, I should do a proper piece on it now.
I'm talking about sorry, I'm talking about the buffing crews from the city itself, the cleaning crews. So they compete with one another, so they need to show their boss or whatever that, you know, that they're clean. So they do like a green dot, and then someone else does a red circle. Then you have a city which is full of these tags.
Where?
But they're done by the cleaning crew.
Where?
So I've heard it from friends from many places. I need to remind where. I'm just wondering if you saw this thing. I'll try to ask them.
No,
yeah, but
yeah, actually there is this Sorry for the Damage Done book, which is about this crew in the Netherlands that spent more money on documenting the cleaning part than on the cleaning itself. And they made a book, and you have on both sides, like before and after. It's this kind of a report they are giving to their boss. So I'm of course I'm curious. I think I saw some pictures of it.
Cool.
Yeah, and apparently it could be also Moscow related. And yeah, I guess Igor knows about it. Sure. But yeah, if you have the info, it will be
I'll
fine.
try to ask them and then
Thank
I'll forward it.
There's a comment question here. I think Moscow, there are examples from Shreya. Shreya? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying that that example that you're saying where the cleaning crews and the graffiti artists and the tag, the kind of dialogue that happens, that was something that Mathieu knows Igor. I think that was something Igor was really interested in, the buffing and the censorship, and then the kind of the battle of the crews for specific places in the city, and kind of even workers who work for the city kind of taking up official language, like things that mark gas pipes where there aren't gas pipes, but using the same marking, things like that.
Okay.
Like a strange.
Yeah.
It's not addressed in the text, like it's an archive text. It's not on his website anymore, but I dig it and find it back. But yeah, I will ask him if he had precise information, because of course he might have. It's just like yeah, almost too much work, Igor. You cannot do everything.
Yeah. You have also Mais Menos in Portugal.
Yeah.
He's working on the more or less the subject. He's doing his PhD also.
Yeah,
You need to reach him also. I think there are interesting research going on.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I don't tend to write a proper article or whatever. It's just part of the process.
You are ongoing.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Svenska.
Thanks, Mathieu. It's fascinating. And the subject you have chosen is, now when I think about it, it's a lot broader than at first sight. And yeah, you're going to have a tough time narrowing it down, I think.
Yeah, sure.
But I did have some type of question that I wanted actually to direct to Jakob, if he's still on, but I'll go anyway.
I'm on.
Okay, nice. There's a case study in Sweden that you perhaps are familiar with or could use, where a commissioned graffiti work from 1989 called Highway was painted over by the landlord last summer by mistake, or so they say. And so that made national news, at least. It was quite a big thing. And we've been discussing, the scene has been discussing how to go about this, if it should be restored, or what I'm getting at is that the half of this piece is now destroyed with blue paint. And there is an amount of people who want to keep it that way, to integrate it into the work, so, as a battle scar, meaning that it adds to the history of this work now and its significance as cultural heritage. And so I was thinking, Jakob is, as I read in the news, he's part of this research group now that have been granted a sum to look into how to preserve or restore murals, not only graffiti and street art. But I was thinking, Jakob, will you take this into consideration that some people now regard that this half destruction of this work as a part of the work? Do you follow me?
Yeah, I follow you. Yeah. I mean, the complexity with that piece is that it's kind of, since it has been in the public realms for more than 30 years now, it's a lot of people and groups that claim ownership. I think among graffiti writers, many would like to see a repainting of the old motif over it. That is something that has come to me several times. Most of the locals that I've talked to, they want a restoration. They want their mural back. It's a mural that they grew up with. And that kind of approach that I have came across it, and I also thought of it myself, is more from a more intellectual or post graffiti context. The interesting thing with this particular painting is that it's actually the second time it is destroyed, because it was even destroyed before it was finished. And the artists who did it, the Schoff crew, still haven't shown the force, actually painted that attack into the wild style piece that they were doing. So they left like scars in the piece after the first attack. So it's an interesting piece that it's, but I think we are discussing it mainly in the research group where I am. We are mainly discussing it as the first goal would be to actually restore it as good as possible. We will not be able to get it back into the original shape, so there will be traces of this. But so it's I think it's very complex in a graffiti. I would say in a graffiti context, a full mural piece that is over 30 years old is actually an antiquity. It's really old. I mean, it is the equivalent of a medieval cathedral in architectural terms. So I think you have to be very sensitive to the historical original in that sense, and especially the local community.
I have something to add.
Sorry?
No, I said that in this regard, actually in Portland, they had a very interesting case where they had a mural that was there for, I think, like something for 5 years, and it all the time would get tagged and it would get throw-ups and things like that on the bottom area because it had a lot of space. So they contacted the artist, and the artist decided, you know what, we're going to incorporate the street art and the graffiti into the piece. I mean, and he went and he changed it, and it was like this big thing where the art council approved it, but they forgot to tell the maintaining crew of the city. So.
Oh, sorry.
No, so then, like, everybody was really happy that they found a solution, and that it's okay, that it's going to be tagged, and where it's going to be tagged, and everybody was working really hard. But then they get a phone call from the guy who does the cleaning and says, "Aha! I cleaned it. You're gonna be so happy that I had time and I went and I cleaned it." And everyone's like, not again.
Well, I just want to add that the Potato Jesus painting, had that not happened, it wouldn't have been renowned. It would just be a run-of-the-mill icon painting, and we would have never heard of it. So in that destruction of the work lies almost all of its value in cultural context. So then that, I mean, can transfer over to certain graffiti or street art works, that communication within a work builds upon the value sort of.
That's actually the same question that is raised by Christian Amodeo's acceptance or pushing to exhibit this removal of the blue painting. The real question is, when you've done your graffiti, you abandon it, you not sign it, you claim your ownership when some company tries to use it as a background because you're an author, intellectual property. But what about the physical property of the painting? For me, I consider when I do a work, even a tag in public space, it belongs to the city as a whole situation. I mean, of course, me, the author, I stay responsible, because juridically I will be responsible of what I'm doing. But there's also the owner of the walls. There's also the cultural policy. There's also the question of the art historian who think what should be and how it should be conserved. I think it's a passionate topic to think about it from not only a juridical point of view, but this question of cultural heritage. Because if you think about immaterial cultural heritage, like dances, instead of buildings, you think about the dances, the tradition. What prevent us, for example, after this mural you were speaking was destroyed, to invite the new generation of writers to do it again, but do it a bit different, because it's their generation. And for me, I tend to consider graffiti writing, urban art, independent urban art, as something that should always be transformed and evolve and rely to the local population. What about, can we imagine a situation where a writer died and you want to pay a tribute? What do? All the writers start to write the name and write RIP. And it's very funny, because sometimes what it happens, you got this local writer you didn't knew that suddenly everywhere more present that he has never been, But what about somebody, Livington, quitting graffiti and you want to address a tribute, you want to put back the memories of the city in situation for a new generation, and suddenly this writer that is not writing, everybody's writing his name, you know, and you can even do it with the same style. It's very interesting to think about this shifting from intellectual property to immaterial patrimony.
Jacob, I think you at last published a chapter on the Keep Fighting Malmö mural that exactly talks about this.
Yes, Eric Hannertz and I did, and we published it last year, I think. And I think we presented it also in Lisbon.
Yes.
Yes, you did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, yeah, that's a similar. That was yeah. So there was the conflict between the local graffiti community who wanted their open wall back in Malmö, and other communities who wanted to keep the memorial piece. It's not a memorial piece because the person didn't die, but he was stabbed by Nazis and almost died. So they wanted to commemorate the fight against fascism and Nazism, and so that was the kind of conflict. I thought it was interesting to study.
Yeah, this is one of the most fascinating and challenging areas of this kind of research. It's the relation with time. It's very complex. This kind of it questions lots of preconceptions, like organization, society preconception of culture, heritage, what's immaterial and material. You know, it touches lots of time and materiality aspects of the spectrum and challenges them in a sense that it's difficult to get answers. So you have a colossal work here, Mathieu. So Mathieu, I hope you'll kill this giant with all your capacity. So and I'm sure you'll. It's a fascinating topic. Well, we are running a bit late. I don't know if no one else wants to add something. You can keep in the loop here in the talking. I will suggest to take a break. So because we will return at 2 with the rest of the panels. I will thank you for this, Mathieu. Sylvia, she apologized, but she had a crash on the computer and she went away. But she says hello and apologized for not being present on the end of this panel. But it was a heavy morning already, so please have a break, and we will get back at 2 for a busy afternoon. I think afternoon in my sense, in my perspective. So it's different geographies. It's different. So thank you, Mathieu. Thank you for all. Okay, see you soon. At 2.